The courtroom was so silent, it felt like even the walls were holding their breath. Judge Anthony Trenga sat high behind the mahogany bench, glasses perched on the tip of his nose, tapping a gavel softly against the wood. Elon Musk stood at the defendant's table, hands loosely folded, face unreadable. The murmurs had stopped. The cameras, although barred from recording, seemed to hum with silent tension. Finally, Judge Trenga cleared his throat. "In light of the evidence and testimony presented," he said, voice low but firm, "this court orders Elon Musk to pay a fine of $500 million for violations related to environmental compliance." A gasp rippled through the room. $500 million. Even for Musk, it wasn't pocket change. Elon's jaw tightened slightly, but he said nothing. Trenga continued, his voice sterner. "This fine will serve as a message that no individual, regardless of influence or innovation, stands above the stewardship of our shared resources." Elon nodded once, respectfully, silently. Reporters scribbled furiously. A court clerk shifted awkwardly behind her desk. Outside, protesters chanted, some for him, some against him. But inside, Elon stayed still. He wasn't thinking about the cameras, the fines, or the headlines. He was thinking about what he could do next. Not to fight back, not to retaliate, but to transform this moment into something bigger. Something that would matter long after the court closed its doors. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to change the meaning of a penalty into the beginning of a revolution. Judge Trenga tapped his gavel again, ready to move on. But before he could speak, Elon Musk raised his hand. "Your Honor," Elon said calmly, voice carrying across the chamber, "I would like to make a proposal." The room stiffened. This wasn't part of the script. Trenga leaned back in his chair, intrigued despite himself. "I'm listening," the judge said carefully. Elon stepped forward. "I accept the court's ruling," he said. "I will pay the $500 million fine in full, without delay." Another murmur stirred through the gallery. "But," Elon continued, "I would respectfully request that the funds be directed toward the creation of a national initiative." He glanced around the room, meeting eyes that had moments ago judged him. A program dedicated to teaching the next generation how to build, innovate, and sustain green technologies, solar power, battery storage, sustainable agriculture. He paused. A future where compliance isn't forced, it's chosen, because they'll know no other way. Trenga blinked, momentarily speechless. Elon set a single sheet of paper on the clerk's desk, an outline titled, "Green Futures Program, Powered by Penalty, Driven by Promise." "You said no one is above stewardship," Elon added quietly. "I agree, and I believe we have a responsibility to prepare others to protect what we were too slow to save." The courtroom was silent, not from anger, from awe. Trenga rubbed his chin, a slow, almost reverent motion. He looked at the paper, then at Elon. And for the first time that day, the judge smiled. Judge Trenga stared at the document for a long time. Long enough for the court reporter to look up nervously. Long enough for the bailiff to shift on his feet. Finally, the judge set his gavel down with a soft click. He removed his glasses, and for the first time during the entire trial, his voice cracked slightly. "My daughter," he said quietly, "used to talk about this." Heads in the gallery tilted, unsure if they heard correctly. Trenga continued, softer now. She studied environmental engineering. She believed the system could change, if enough people cared to build something better. He looked up, his eyes a little shinier than before. She passed away 5 years ago. The room held its breath. Elon's face didn't shift into pity. He simply listened. "She would have loved this idea," Trenga said, tapping the paper gently with his fingertips. There was a silence between them that didn't need to be filled. Not by laws, not by arguments, not even by apologies, only by the shared understanding that sometimes loss carves out a space big enough for hope to finally land. Trenga cleared his throat. "Mr. Musk," he said, voice steadying, "this court not only accepts your proposal," he paused, "it honors it." And with that simple statement, the fine was no longer a punishment. It was a foundation. Outside, the protesters didn't know it yet. The media didn't know it yet. But in that courtroom, something changed. Something real. Something that would outlive every headline written that day. 3 months later, the first foundation stone was laid. It wasn't some corporate skyscraper. It wasn't a flashy showroom. It was a school. Nestled on the edge of Austin, Texas, where city glass met open fields, the Green Futures Center rose from the dirt. Solar panels lined the rooftops. Rainwater collection tanks shimmered under the sun. Gardens replaced parking lots. Inside, classrooms buzzed with something rarer than electricity: hope. Kids learned how to build solar circuits before they learned how to drive. They designed vertical farms with recycled water systems. They printed 3D models of wind turbines instead of doing book reports. Elon visited often, but not with cameras, not for ribbon cuttings. He came in jeans and a plain t-shirt, sitting quietly at the back of workshops, watching, listening. Sometimes he'd help solder a panel. Sometimes he'd just hand a kid a fresh notebook and say, "Fill it with better ideas than mine." The first cohort was small, just 120 students, but the waiting list grew overnight to thousands. A documentary team requested to film the opening ceremony. Elon declined. "This isn't about spotlight," he said. "It's about ignition." Across the country, whispers grew louder. Why isn't every city doing this? Other innovators followed. Grants flowed. Entire communities rethought what it meant to build forward, not backward. And every day, beneath a simple plaque at the center's entrance, visitors read a single line: "Born from a fine, built for a future." It was almost a year to the day when Judge Trenga walked through the gates of the Green Futures Center. No robe, no gavel, just a simple gray jacket and a quiet, almost hesitant step. Elon was already there, kneeling next to a group of fifth graders as they pieced together a mini solar array. He didn't notice Trenga at first. He was too busy adjusting a loose wire for a kid named Ava, who wanted to power her model rocket. Trenga watched from a distance, hands folded behind his back. The judge had seen a lot in his life: policy changes, political speeches, broken promises. But he had never seen anything like this. He walked slowly toward the garden, where older students tended vertical crops, growing from recycled plastics. One teenager proudly explained how their closed-loop irrigation system saved over 90% of water compared to traditional farming. Trenga nodded, impressed beyond words. Finally, Elon looked up, caught his eye. No formal greetings, no speeches, just a simple exchange of looks, and an understanding too deep for ceremony. Elon walked over, hands in his pockets. The two men stood side by side, watching the students buzzing around, filled with a kind of purpose most adults forgot how to have. After a long moment, Trenga spoke softly. "She would have loved this." Elon just smiled. Not wide, not for show. A small, knowing smile. The kind you give when you know you didn't just win a case. You changed something much harder to touch. And for the first time in a long time, Judge Trenga felt something heavier than regret. Hope. As dusk fell over the Green Futures Center, the solar panels atop the roof shimmered under the last rays of the sun. Lights flickered on inside the classrooms. But they weren't harsh or sterile. They were soft, warm, powered by the very hands that had learned how to capture sunlight and turn it into life. Elon stood alone near the entrance, gazing at the plaque. born from a fine, built for a future. He traced the words with his eyes, feeling the weight of what had started as a courtroom punishment and had become a living heartbeat. Behind him, students laughed as they tested small glider drones made from recycled materials. Teachers pinned hand-drawn posters on corkboards titled "Dreams in Progress." Somewhere down the hall, a girl in a wheelchair explained the design of her solar-powered mobility scooter to a group of younger students, her face glowing with pride. This was it. This was why battles had to be fought, why fines weren't always failures, why sometimes the greatest revolutions start with a quiet, stubborn refusal to let anger win. Across town, Judge Trenga sat in his modest living room, a copy of the Green Futures Program brochure resting on his lap. He smiled faintly, wiping at his eyes, because he knew. This wasn't Elon Musk's legacy alone. It belonged to every student who dared to build something better, to every spark of innovation now rooted in gratitude instead of guilt, and to every broken moment life had once handed out, that someone, somewhere, decided to turn into light.
If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Subscribe for more inspiring stories.